What's up, champs? Welcome to another season of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Ben Burnett. Joining me tonight, for the first time in several weeks, I guess he appeared as a disembodied voice last week's show. But tonight, he's back in face and in flesh. My pal and yours, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, my buddy, my pal. How are you doing this fine Tuesday evening?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to have multiple hockey games in the same day. It was nice to get a little taste and a amuse-bouche, as I think we've said in the past. But yeah, now we're getting, multiple games a day, and soon we're coming up to a humongous Thursday. I'm really, really excited and looking forward to it. Can't wait to get that gambler's thrill when you see a goal come across the notifications.
Yeah, it's a little bit annoying. We're, a period and a half, about halfway through this Rangers Lightning game. And last time I checked anyway, I turned it off because I'm such a professional. No goals. So I was hoping to see some action before we started the cast here. But unfortunately, still 0-0, about 15 minutes left in the second. Unfortunately, the one piece of news from a fantasy perspective that we have, Vitaly Kravtsov already done for the game with an upper body injury, squeezed into the boards during the first period. Bit of a bummer. He had a nice looking spot on the second line with Panarin and Trocheck.
Yeah, took a hit from Hedman and had to exit the ice. So that's a bummer. I hope he'll be back soon. But it has been interesting, I think, to see Kakko in his top line deployment there. So I think we had hoped for sort of maybe a similar opportunity for Kravtsov. We're not going to see that, at least not quite yet. But Kakko is a guy who I think we want to definitely keep an eye on in terms of hopefully being able to get some production. Obviously, these are two world-class goalies. So those of us hoping for a rain of goals in the first game of the real season, if you want to call it that, we may have to wait a little bit longer.
That's right. So for those of you who are new for this season of Short Shifts, we are the twice weekly check-in show between Brian and Elon's ginormous Sunday evening episodes of Keeping Karlsson. And this show is designed to keep you up to date with fantasy news, takes, and analysis all throughout the fantasy season. This year, as the folks who are following us for the live show right now know, we're live streaming every episode at 8:30 Eastern time on Twitch at twitch.tv/keepingkarlsson. We're being joined by our good pal John Reed on the ones and twos. John is going to be popping in a bit later to drop some fantasy knowledge, some nuggets on us. But Louis, let's get into the show. And we do have a little bit of, this is the first episode of the season, but we do have some actual hockey to talk about because, as we mentioned earlier, the NHL's Global Series was a tremendous success this year. Everyone's talking about the games in Prague between Nashville and San Jose. And, with our show, obviously, there's not much to say about the Philip Forsbergs of the world, the UC Sarosi. But I do want to talk about Luke Kunin to start us off, who scored a power play goal and got an assist along with 4 shots and 4 hits, averaging almost 19 minutes in the first 2 games of the season, playing on line 1 for San Jose, also featuring on the second power play unit. If we look at Kunin's numbers, he's never seen more than 16 minutes a night over a full season. And the splits with these last 2 games are very slanted toward the first game when he did play 21 minutes, just 16 minutes in game 2. But if he is going to see, 17, 18 minutes a night, I'm kind of into Luke Kunin, a guy who's probably being dropped fairly significantly among Yahoo and Fantrax leagues because he was added as a streamer for those early week games. But I'm kind of into him like the same way that Tanner Jeannot was sort of interesting and fantasy relevant at times last year. A guy who can put up peripheral numbers and is getting enough exposure to Timo Meier, Tomas Hertl, that he can be fantasy relevant for at least when he's hot, right? For stretches.
Yeah. I kind of think I think he's got to be considered, at least right now, as kind of a Jeannot plus. I definitely would take Kunin over Jeannot right now just because, that line mate quality at even strength is going to be a lot different. Jeannot playing from that third line right now with another guy we're going to be talking about later occupying a slot on the second line that maybe he would have been able to move into. Really like him for categories leagues. Or leagues that are going to give you some credit for hits. Obviously, the more the better. But love to see 2 shots a game, 2 hits a game, and he's got a point per game so far. Obviously, you're not going to expect that to continue. But if you grabbed him and you've got him, I say hold on while he is, hot and getting this nice deployment. Even in a couple losses, being able to point, I think, is pretty important. And certainly, be ready to drop him if he cools off or if he gets demoted. But I think that is a very nice spot to be playing from. And like you're right, we saw the transaction trends. He's a guy who's getting dropped quite a bit just because, people grabbed him just for that opening night. But he might be worth a hold for a little while longer.
And shouts out to our buddy Elon. We have a live score announcement. Mika Zibanejad, shorthander, to start the scoring in this Tampa Bay New York game. Assists from Jacob Trouba and Keandre Miller. I added Keandre Miller in a league, and I'm, in a bangers league, I think I'm pretty interested in what Keandre could do this year with extra time on ice. Let's continue with the planned show though, Lewis, and I know that there's another player you want to talk about who featured in those incredible, iconic Prague games last week.
Definitely. Before we do, just want to mention, and we got a good tip from TPK Games in the chat. There will be a little bit more competition for that slot that is currently occupied by Kunin once Barabanov gets back. So just another thing to keep an eye on. But if he plays well enough, I don't see why he wouldn't get to hold that spot. Barabanov, definitely ran into some really slow stretches last year and wasn't able to necessarily produce with that nice deployment. Yeah, so another guy who showcased out in Prague was Nino Niederreiter, who had an extremely sustainable 3 goals on 3 shots during the 2 Prague games, playing on that second line with Ryan Johansson and on the second power play. This is a guy who was seeing under 15 minutes a night, so not quite the increased minutes bonanza that we're seeing from Kunin. But can't hardly argue with the results. Anyone who drafted or streamed him is feeling very good about themselves right now. I'm wondering if you're feeling any of this Nino excitement after this hot start, or is this a flash in the pan? And who would you prefer between the 2 options that we've discussed to this point?
Yeah, I think the 14 minutes a night, the 3 shots in 2 games, not all that excited for Nino. I guess I don't mind the Rijo second line, decent streamer type. But I think that Kunin for me is somebody who you could see kind of being in a, who's a good example of this? Like Michael Furland was in it for a couple of seasons recently before he ran into repetitive head injuries that ended his career, unfortunately. But was somebody who you knew he wasn't going to put up 60 plus points, but he would put up points in bunches on his way to 45, 50 point pace, and then could shoot and hit and put up PIMs for you to fill out those categories. I think that Kunin has more intrigue to me for that reason.
Yeah, he's kind of like one of those any given night type guys where, if you just need a handful of points, you might be able to get them if things go right. I think I'm with you there. How about Nino versus third liner Tanner Jeannot?
I guess I would go Jeannot because I feel like he'll fill out more. Like in a points league, I feel like he'll just have more shots and hits to sort of prop him up. But I mean, if you were asking me who's more likely to put up 60 points, then I would say it's Nino. But yeah, these are 2 guys that I would probably be picking between 12 guys at this tier if I were making this decision in most leagues.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we with all the excitement of that early season, we forget that there are 30 other teams that we can be talking about.
Yes. Well, no, we don't forget that, but maybe maybe everyone else. That's what we're here for, is to remind folks of all those other teams. All right, Lewis, one more headline here, talking about power play 1 in Florida. the Desert Cats. What is the nickname for the Florida Panthers? The Thurs, right? We call them the Thurs.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. So the Florida Thurs have announced that they are going into the season with a 3 forward, 2 defense power play 1 setup, a top line of Barkov, Kachuk, and Reinhart, and Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour on the power play, on the points, I should say. Brandon Montour, obviously the intriguing player here because he's the one who's not rostered in every single fantasy league imaginable, only 12% rostered on Yahoo, and has seen some power play run in the past with Anaheim, but has never really leapt out as a strong power play option. I guess I'm wondering, Lewis, how interesting Montour is to you in a shallow league, in a deep league, or is this somebody who you see as a flyer for a defenseman where you might hold him as a number 4 for now just to see how things go, or is he more of a streamer type for you?
I think he could be interesting, kind of like lottery ticket. I don't have a ton of confidence in him. I believe, unless I'm mistaken, he got some time on Power Play 1 when Ekblad was injured last season and didn't produce anything with it at all. I think we were talking about that when we were discussing G-Force, Gustav Forsling, as an option and sort of talking about his chances to get on a power play versus Montour. Clearly, that particular flip of the coin has come up in Montour's favor. And maybe having Ekblad out there instead of having to sort of be the power play QB is the secret sauce for him to have some success. Not a ton of great scheduling for him. The Thurs only have 2 games this week, and they are on Thursday and Saturday, which are very busy nights already. But a lot of teams only carry kind of that minimum number of defensemen, so they might all be rostered. And I'm into him in the way I am into like a Kalen Addison, probably, where like you've got somebody who has an opportunity, and if they don't work out, you probably didn't spend a whole lot to get them, so you can kind of cut them loose. His advantage over Addison is that he is playing for, a higher scoring team, or at least it was higher scoring last year. We'll kind of see how they deal with some of the changes that they made. And he's likely to get more minutes. I think Addison is going to be pretty sheltered and probably, a mid to high teens type minute player, where Montour, I think, does have the opportunity to play some more minutes and rack up some more peripherals. That being said, Addison has a little bit more of an offensive pedigree, so I think that helps balance the scales a little bit further in his direction. So at the end of the day, I kind of see him as a very similar option in that regard. Worth a pickup as a potential lottery ticket. If he sticks and can be productive, you'll be high-fiving yourself all season. And if he doesn't do much, you can drop him, and it didn't really cost you much at all.
I'm going to say I'm much more into Kalen Addison than Brandon Montour, mainly because we know what Brandon Montour looks like at even strength. I don't think that we see a change in his usage at even strength to a significant degree. I think very much it's somebody who, like, best case scenario, puts up an extra, let's say 15 power play points this year, right? And then we're talking about a guy who overall last year would have been about a 45 point guy with very, very little in the way of peripherals to talk about, I guess, about a hit or a block per game. Kalen Addison at least represents a little bit more possibility to me. So I think that the upside is, the other thing is, I feel like with 2 defensemen, there won't, Maybe the plan is to move the puck around the top of the net, or around the top up to the point and work it back and forth between those defensemen. But to me, it feels a little bit like if you have 2 power play defensemen, you don't have one, to butcher the expression about quarterbacks. Just because I feel like you're just most likely you're just nullifying some of the advantage you get from having the power play and having 4 offensive players all out there on the ice. So I think that Kalen Addison in Minnesota at least is like, you could see him being a complementary piece that creates a better power play in Minnesota, whereas I don't feel like Brandon Montour is the ideal solution in that spot.
For sure. So I gotta say, if you're coming out with the big wet blanket for the two defenseman power play there, I can only imagine how you will react if we do manage to see Colorado roll out their 3 defenseman second power play unit. But that is a chat for another day, I believe.
I also feel like Colorado has the personnel to pull off some stuff that most, especially like running incredible defense. Like, I mean, this is a team that has Cale Makar and Bowen Byram and Devon Taves and Sam Girard. Like, that is not the situation in Florida.
Sure, their cup runneth over.
Yes, exactly. Literally. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we are going to throw out the holiday gift guides and bring in the fantasy wish lists. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, we are now entering the new segment of our show. This was an LE original. Do you mind explaining to the audience what the premise is here?
Yeah, for sure. We had 2 games and 2 teams kind of to talk about, so I thought, why not start out the fantasy season with looking at some things that we would hope for, that we would wish for, that if our, if we could rub a genie's lamp, what would we ask for to see this season that would be interesting? Not necessarily like big time homer stuff or, I want to win a round of the playoffs in the cupful, those kind of far reached, high hopes wishes. But instead sort of focus on some things that we think would make the season interesting, that would be, cool to see in fantasy. And so I will start out, and this is something that I had for my, this was from the Hot Takes episode over the off season, on the Brian and Elon mega show. But I called my shot. I said, we're going to get a mostly healthy season from Matt Murray. He was going to be a true number 1. And, ultimately the Leafs were going to be very happy to have, gotten him. So yeah, my wish number 1 is that Murray stays healthy, within reason. I don't think we can expect him to play every game or play 65 games. He is Matt Murray, but like Matt Murray style healthy, and rack up 35 wins, and help Toronto get that monkey off their back and make it beyond the second round of the playoffs. How far? We're going to have to wait until I reach a later wish.
I mean, you've gifted them a full extra round in the playoffs. The monkey starts in round 1, I think.
Or well, I meant like get to round 2. Get to round 2.
Okay.
I don't know what exactly I said.
You said get past round. It's no big deal. You know what? Because we are cruising through. So what we're going to do now that Lewis has presented his first take, we are going to I'm going to rate his take out of 10 from 1, not likely to happen, to 10. I could see it. And in this case, I am going to give this take a 4 out of 10. Certainly, Matt Murray and the Leafs could be a match made in heaven. Doesn't seem super likely, I guess, to me. But ultimately, what stays in the way of this coming true is your cousin Dave-like confidence in predicting the health of an NHL player, which to me just seems like a fool's errand. So it's tough for me to get too hype on this take.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, he has given us almost nothing to demonstrate that he is, capable and ready of carrying on this particular task. But listen, this is not, fantasy. I think this is going to happen necessarily. This is my wish list, and I am spending one of my 3 here, to get Matt Murray back on track and to demonstrate that he is a true number 1.
My dad is going to be stoked to hear that you're buying the Matt Murray Kool-Aid. I'll go next then. Mine is different, but it is another Canadian team, a good thing happening to another Canadian team. Mine is about Evan Bouchard, and I think that Evan Bouchard is going to get on the Oilers' top power play this season, and I think that Evan Bouchard could just be a league winner in that scenario. We saw the peripherals that Bouchard puts up when he's given enough time on ice to produce the shots, the blocks, and a decent number of hits as well. But we've also seen a player who is able to produce at a very solid offensive clip. Somebody whose passing game is really helpful when you have a player like Connor McDavid who can flee the zone at a moment's notice, and somebody who I think chemistry-wise could be, like I said, it could be a league-winning pick. Somebody who I could see putting up 65 points in the right scenario. 65 points if he's up on that top power play in Edmonton for most of the season. So Evan Bouchard, power play 1 league winner, is the number 1 on my wish list this fantasy season.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. This was a guy who managed 43 points with only 7 on the power play. So certainly, if he ups his usage, there is a ton of room to grow in terms of his possibilities. So we've established that a 1 is like total pipe dream, and a 10 is I can definitely see it, right?
Yeah, I love
that's our scale. I
really like how the lower side is like no chance ever, and the high side is like, I guess.
I guess it could happen. Yeah, well, we're
not definitely, but yeah, sure.
So this is one I'm going to rate pretty high. I'm going to give this an 8. Ooh. I think that what we've seen from Tyson Barrie has been underwhelming. He really just hasn't been able to deliver on kind of his promise that we saw previously before he came out to Edmonton. I think there's always the argument that, like, okay, if you don't have Barrie out there on power play 1, then why is he on the team at all? And I understand, where that point is coming from, and I see why, people would have that approach. But I think, at the end of the day, if you really want to be competitive, you've got to get the most out of your lineup. And I could see Bouchard up there as the power play 1 guy, being the best possible guy to fill that slot. And if that's the case, I think that you have to jump all over it because, that window is only open for so long. You only get so many shots at it. And I think if Edmonton wants to be a team that gets out there and really is competitive and takes a real shot at winning a cup, I think that Evan Bouchard might be the guy to help them do that. So I love that you're saying he's a league winner for fantasy. I'm saying that he could be a league winner in the NHL as well. That is a distinct possibility. So I really like that, and I think I'm going with a pretty high rating. I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10.
They call him Bouchard, not Bouch Soft. That's the only thing that's left to be said here, I think.
All right. I am going to jump into my next one here. And this one is a little bit of, I suppose it is. There's some tangential fantasy stuff here. But what I really want to see is I think it would be really cool if Arizona leans into their crazy arena situation this season and it just turns out to be awesome. Like if Arizona State's hockey arena is packed with 5,000 Coyote diehards who are screaming their heads off. I think that would be such a cool situation to play in. I think that it's going to be different from any other place where you can see a game in the NHL. It's going to be the most intimate setting that you can have in the league. And I would just love to see them, outpace their very, very meager expectations. No one is expecting a ton from this team, but if you could have a Clayton Keller that puts together, if I'm making my wish, right, a 70, 75 point season, where he's exciting, if they can, move on from Jacob Chikrin and, see some of their young talent take some steps forward. Again, I don't think anyone expects a ton from this team, but I just feel like, and I think Brian mentioned this too on a previous show, like getting to go to a game there would be really interesting, to see the NHL in a college setting. I've been to a ton of college hockey games, but I've never seen an NHL game in a, little college arena. So, big season from Clayton Keller. Maybe Karel Vejmelka can continue to outpace what we sort of think can happen for him. Obviously, being you talked with Nate about Vejmelka last show, and he only put together high 800s. So I think if he can get into a little bit closer to league average, this could be kind of a fun team to watch. And I think that the setting is going to be really interesting for the few years that we have it. And I'm wishing them a ton of success in that tiny arena.
The vibes are so good from you right now on this one. I want to give this one a high score just because I think it's the most fun prediction that we have on our list. Maybe it's not going to happen, But hey, I'm not trying to harsh on these bad vibes. Shouts out Cousin Dave's. This one is all about the vibes for me. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
All right, nice. And one thing I was thinking about too is even if we can't get like a ton of raging Coyotes fans in there, maybe we'll get those tickets bought up by some snowbirds who are down, for the warm weather, and at least it can be a fun arena for whoever your away team is. Instead of the big echoing empties, you can still get your sellouts and have a loud raucous crowd, even if it's not necessarily for your boys.
So I'm going to go in a similar direction here and talk about a team that has very low expectations coming into the season, and that is the Seattle Kraken, a team who I'm going to go ahead and say is a fringe playoff team here. It doesn't sound like a super hot take or anything to be like, oh yeah, they'll finish in that like 7 to 10 spot. I guess in the NBA, they would be a play-in team. But I think that the reason I wanted to bring this up on a show like Short Shifts on a fantasy hockey podcast is because I think that this is something I talked about in the offseason too. There's a lot of opportunity here for fantasy value. So in particular, I think Matty Beniers, Oliver Bjorkstrand, and Philip Grubauer all are going to pay dividends to fantasy managers who got them late. And the other name I want to mention is Jared McCann, who we talked about a few weeks ago on a previous episode of Short Shifts. These are guys who are going like in the 140th or later overall, and they are going to be the primary producers on a team that last year was basically horrendous because they couldn't stop a puck to save their life. But as we get closer to, regular season games and now that we're into the season, I feel like more and more folks are starting to hop on the Seattle bandwagon, and I'm joining them. Yeah, I'm not trying to be a hipster here, as I was accused of being in the chat earlier. This is all me. I'm all in on these Seattle Kraken.
All right. Well, I love your enthusiasm, and definitely big vibes. And yeah, I can see your argument too. Like they've got these new pieces, they've got these new, rookies or limited NHL. I guess they're both still count as rookies. Beniers played last year, but some support down the middle where they didn't really have it before. Some newfound depth with it, which I think is going to be really exciting. I do think, they get to play some teams that are in their space, in terms of success level. If that's, not,
they're in a bad division is what you're trying to say. Yeah.
Yes. In so many words, I could have cut to the quick there, I suppose. So yeah, I think the opportunity is there. I'm a little nervous about the, extent to which we're sort of hoping that they are going to be able to, capitalize on some of the improvements that they made, just because it feels like once again, this is a team that could potentially end up as less the sum of their parts, once they're out there on the ice. Like the pieces are there, but I still think they are going to, need some time to gel. I think that, it took them a while last year, and we shouldn't discount the fact that they were beset by injuries as well. But ultimately, I do think it's going to be more of a challenge maybe than some folks think, for Seattle to sort of put all the pieces together. And while I like the idea of them sort of being a mid-low team, I think they might still be a little bit away from being as competitive as they hope to be. I hope I'm wrong, because I wish all the best, certainly for Matty Beniers, Michigan Wolverine. But I think that, and like you said, being picked 140 and beyond, I do think that these are guys like fantasy wise that are going to be able to help you out. But I don't see it yet in terms of, where the team is going to end for the season. So I like it for fantasy. So, from that perspective, I think I'm like a 6, but for like NHL success, I think I'm going to be closer to a 3.
All right, Lewis, tell us your last wish of this fantasy season.
All right. Well, I may have to abdicate my citizenship here after this one, but I am wishing, my wish 3 is for an all Canada Stanley Cup finals. I think that would be really fun, really exciting. I think a lot of folks would enjoy it very much. Maybe not necessarily on our side of the divide. But I think that could be really thrilling, as John has put up on the screen. This hasn't happened since 1989. I was a wee lad of, I guess I would have been 2 in that early summer when it last happened. So, I think that this is a season where maybe we've had the best chance of it taking place yet. Now, of course, really the only team out of the East that can do it is Toronto. So we're putting a lot of hopes into Toronto being able to successfully, get that monkey off their back, as we talked about before, and make it not only to the second round, but beyond the second round, beyond the third round, to those finals. I could see, the possibility of Calgary pulling it off. I could see Edmonton pulling it off. My ideal way to see it happen is, since this is my wish, I want to see this All-Canada Stanley Cup final happen on the backs of a crazy Rocket Richard season for Austin Matthews. He just misses 70 goals and ends up with a nice number of 69. A crazy 130-point Art Ross season from McDavid. This is not hoping for, the little guys to pull up and succeed. This is for hoping for those big juggernauts from the top of the draft just go bananas this season. I think it would be super fun to see a Toronto and Edmonton, or a Toronto and Calgary Stanley Cup finals with just a ton of scoring from the stars on those teams.
I'm going to give this one a 2. Everybody gets so hype about making this prediction every offseason, and listen, you're spinning a yarn that I love. The individual player predictions, the fantasy side of this, super into it. When it comes to the playoff element, I don't know. Who cares? I don't know. You're talking about how you might be unpopular on your side of the border, and my thought is, Americans will riot when when the sport they care the least about involves them slightly less for one season. I think everyone will be okay.
Yeah. I imagine so. I was going to say, I think that, obviously this one has a lot of factors that go into it, and it is very difficult, obviously, to arrive at a Stanley Cup final. But this is not one that I have been, to be fair, I have not been one of the Toronto slappies who every offseason is like, this is it, this is the year. So, but I really feel like, just the stars are primed for such a fantasy season, that it would be fun to see this happen and to finally actually happen.
All right, Lewis, I have one more wish, and I'm not allowed to wish for more fantasy hockey wishes, unfortunately. So I have to, take this one very seriously. And my third and final wish for the 2022 fantasy hockey season, Jack Eichel has such a good season this year that he is a top 10 pick once again in fantasy drafts in 2023. Eichel obviously over in Vegas now, where he is going to start the season playing with Phil Kessel and Riley Smith at even strength, and on an overloaded top unit on the power play with Stone Stevenson and Smith, as well as Shea Theodore. Jack Eichel was incredible to end the season last year, looked extremely good in the preseason, was somebody who I think a lot of folks have targeted in late second, third rounds in their drafts, and is somebody who is, I think, very, very likely to offer excess value to what was already a very high draft slot. So I like Jack Eichel to finally put it together, put up a 95-point season with 3.5 to 4 shots per game. And become like I said, maybe he goes 8th or 9th in fantasy drafts next year, around the Alex Barkov slot in 2023. What do you think about that one, Lewis?
I love this call, and I think that anybody who drafted Eichel does as well. Just getting him back to being what he was before the neck injury and all of that drawn out drama and nonsense with Buffalo, I think would be so outstanding. He just was such a fun fantasy own because of that enormous shot volume that you mentioned. Almost nobody shoots the way that Eichel does when he is on his best game. And I think, I'm very hopeful that we're finally in a season where he is going to be settled in his role, where he knows what it's going to be coming into the season, where he is over the injury issues, and Yeah, I think that he is capable of producing the kind of season that we're talking about. That talent is still very much there. And I think that with this opportunity that he's got now, probably with the best line mates that he's ever been able to enjoy, I think that this is, up there with like a 7 or an 8, in terms of possibility. And I'd love to see him, be one of those guys who's way up there at the top, because there are other guys who can score at his rate, but there are not many people who can shoot the way that he does. And that makes him just so appealing, because if he can, up his rates even just a little bit, in terms of his shooting percentage, the difference that makes on his totals and on his ceiling, really is tremendous.
All right, Lewis, that is all the time that we have for tonight's episode. We are deep into long shift territory at this point. I want to thank everyone for listening. And Lewis, I want to thank you for being back. I'm really excited about this season, buddy, and looking forward to getting into the meat of it and talking about more games with you on Thursday night.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. There's going to be a ton of action going on when we are next recording. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for everybody who joined us on Twitch for the live version of the show. Big thanks to John Reed for helping set us up with our cool graphics and getting everything running the way we like it. Be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson, Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. His episode is in the main feed, and hopefully you have listened to it already, but if you haven't, it is not too late. Check it out. Also recommend that you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News, and you can find all of the information from those Twitter accounts summarized at the Game Day Tweets site. Please also visit the great sites where we research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Check, and Cacupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.